Alright, let's just talk about the bokeh shape, the defocus node that ships with glass. I tried really hard to mimic as many lens characteristics as possible using this defocus node. And again, it's sped up as much as it can to provide the features that it can do. And the more knobs you turn on, the slower it will get, just because it has to do way more calculations, but the realism of that will increase. So I just have a basic render with lots of highlights, and I'm just blurring it out a lot, just focal point really close to the camera. And I am playing with the aperture essentially. So that is currently what we are looking at. But before we dive too deep into creating or replicating a bokeh shape, I just want to show you what we can do with the defocus node, because I think that is very interesting for a lot of people. That is not just blurring it, and it's not just a standard defocus node that you get. It's very sophisticated and has lots of professional features that you would actually see in a lens. So using the glass utility node, I created this the depth ramp. I create just a couple of dots here, and they have a, let's see, depth here. There's like a depth ramp here, right? So I can actually focus to something that is in the like has a foreground and a background. So I'm creating the glass node here, and let me get that going. Focal point, I'll just, I don't know, pick something around here, have a really long lens, let's say 100. You know, you see it starts to blur. I can lower the f-stop here, maybe f1.2, and you can see I will try to make this actually a little bit bigger for the recording. And you can see that we are defocusing the image. And this is obviously expected behavior. And we can go even more. So now we got really strong bokeh shapes. If I scale up, you can see they are starting to overlap. And this is expected. So one thing on the left here actually is a PureRef board that I just pulled up to have some references that kind of show what I'm trying to do here. So for one, you can see there's some kind of fringing going on around the bokeh shapes depending on the focal point. So it's somehow focal point is probably saying the Nikon label here. And the foreground lights, the LEDs, get like a purple tinge, and then the ones in the back get like some kind of greenish tinge. And that's a chromatic aberration on the bokeh shapes. And that's, you can quite easily model that just using aberrations. But the cool thing about the defocus node, it actually does it based on depth. So I can go to aberrations, chromatic bokeh, and I can turn it on. And you can see the same phenomenon happening here in the defocus node. So we get the greenish tint here, and we get the purplish tint in the foreground. And if I offset my focal point, you will see that it is just offsetting those things. And it's pretty realistic in terms where the focal point moves. You can see that is offset properly. And that is kind of mimicking this behavior here. Then I want to show you that based on foreground and background, the bokeh shape also changes the orientation. So in the foreground, it's kind of flipped. So if I actually change my shape to a library icon, like a library, custom bokeh shape is what I mean, and we find something that is obviously flipping, you will see that, let's say the top right, the halo, let's play with the black point quick. You can see that there's like a dark spot at the top on the background, and on the foreground it's flipped. It's at the top. It's the black spot at the bottom right. So the bokeh shape also flips depending on where you will see it in the camera. So if it's a foreground reflection, a foreground bokeh shape, it is flipped versus the background one. That's also pretty cool. So the pupil shape is rotating based on the focal point. So again, if I change it, you will see that they start moving the opposite angle. There we go. So that's mimicking that. If you go back to bokeh shape round, it's obviously not obvious because it's all the same, but it does happen. So next thing is cat eye. So I got a lot of questions about that and how the cat eye is kind of performing. And if I, let's say, go to cat eye, you will see, let's say, more examples here. that we are able to shape it based on the lens. And what is cat eye? Cat eye is exactly what you see here on the aperture. When you look something straight on, you get a perfectly round bokeh shape. But as soon as the light comes in from the side, which you will see on this on the edges of a lens, you can see it's kind of clipping the aperture. So if I slowly turn it off, you can see that something is pushing into the view, which is called cat eye. And you have a bit of parameters to like how strong it should come in and how fast it should fall off. And you can also say, okay, I want to, when we apply cat eye, I also want to kind of vignette it. It's because less light comes in from the sides because the aperture is clipped. That's what's happening right here with this light loss parameter. What you can do on top of that is you can model a lens obstruction, just a simple dot that sometimes you see in a couple of lenses, and you can soften this out if you want to do that. But I wanted to talk more about these kind of shaping things. Some lenses will have some kind of lens hoods on. So let's just disable cat eye for a second. Under advanced, I also have that an option here. Let's see if I actually have something that replicates what I'm trying to talk about. Maybe here? Sometimes on the very far edges, you will see that the shape is being kind of cut off. I probably don't have a perfect example right now here. I should have looked for one, but I think the best bet would be the one I just had here at the top. Towards the very far edges, you can see some kind of clipping, and that's usually something if you have a lens hood on or there's a flag on set that is just preventing and lensing on the sensor, then you put some kind of flags to block highlights. And you can see that in anamorphic lenses quite strongly, and I can model that here with the lens hooding. So you can see I'm pushing. It's not the same as the cat eye, but it's a similar phenomenon. Something is moving and covering the aperture. And you can adjust the shape. At the moment, this is just a round rim around the, similar as a cat's eye, but then you also have the petal shaping. That is essentially something that is pushing in, and you can see how it looks like. And you can also rotate that and have a little bit of customization of it to kind of cut off the bokeh shapes. And same idea, you can say how strong it influences the center, and also is it supposed to darken the lens like a vignetting. So that happens, plus you can apply cat's eye as well. So you have kind of 2 in 1. You can see now the petal is kind of cut off as well because the cat's eye, the aperture covering is also there. So you can kind of have them both together. You just need to play with them until you kind of match what your lens is doing. Like if I push this really strongly, and this is now the shape, and I now go back to cat eye and pull that in, you can see now that we get the petal, but it's kind of softened at the top left corner, which kind of mimics that shape, and that is the idea. Next thing is the bokeh shaping. So you have corrected and overcorrected and undercorrected lenses, and you can also mimic that using the spherical character. So I can darken the center, which is kind of the overcorrected one, and I can do the inverse, which is the undercorrected one. You can see we're kind of mimicking both of these kind of phenomenons. Let's maybe, to show it better, disable all of this stuff and go back to the lens character. You can see we're kind of modeling both of these looks as well. And next up is bokeh shaping based off a strong lens. Anamorphic lenses tend to do that. They kind of stretch and pull the bokeh shape based on the lens type. So I could turn on astigmatism, and you will see that the bokeh shape is kind of stretched from the center outside. Or I can flip it and it goes around. You can see now the bokeh shape is rotating around the lens. And very similar to, you've got Coma as well, which kind of stretches out like a comet would do. You can see it's not kind of egg-shaped. That's kind of, all of these kind of together happen in a lens. So you got astigmatism, Coma, You get this chromatic bokeh shaping, like that's chromatic aberration on it. And you get cat eye as well to kind of have that cut-off shape. You can see now they're getting more teardrop shaped. You can also enable petal lens hooding. Now we're kind of putting essentially everything to 11 here. And you can, I forgot about that, anamorphic squeezing to stretch them vertically based on anamorphic lenses. So that is now pulling them apart. And you can see now the processing time goes up because all of these little knobs are enabled. And one thing I didn't mention yet, let's actually talk about that quick. If I disable the heavy things. Also control middle clicking resets to all the values. It's like a standard behavior. It just goes to the default, but it's quite handy. You can have field curvature, which means the focal intensity changes based on the edge of the lens. So on the outside, you can say the outsides are way softer, typical lens behavior. Or you can do the opposite. You can have the outside be sharper, so that you can also mimic here. And now let's apply all of these things onto maybe one sec. We can also do, obviously, iris shaping. So you can do your manual. Let's say if you go to result, bokeh shape, you have your shape. And you can do all sorts of characteristics here. You can model that same lens character. You can have the curvature, how strong it kind of fades. And there's a little bit of things going on. I probably need to fix what's going on here. But you can definitely have a custom procedural way to create your own shape. And let's do rim. So you have a hotter outside ring. You can kind of see that here, and also obviously in these guys. And you can break up the shapes like a little noise pattern. That's also quite common. A little bit of deformations. You can add a very basic noise thing, and you can play with the scaling of that noise. And onion rings, I like that quite a lot. So you can actually have like the staggered effect. Let's see if I have an example of onion ringing. But it does occur quite frequently as well. Maybe I don't have a good one here that shows it. No, but that is also something you see on certain lenses. And if we go back to the result here, results, you'll see what's going on. So the lens dirt or whatever is probably way too much, but you get the idea. You can kind of play with this, and also under sampling quality, it's on preview to speed it up. Full is also a little bit slower, but now you can actually see the onion ringing going on. And let's say we go and we want to say 12 maybe, so we have more blades to play with. You're kind of replicating a nicely looking bokeh shape with this. So all possible to customize them. And there's also the library. So you can go to diagnostic library, and you have lots of them at your disposal to play with. Maybe let's go 79 and go to where is it? Library. What did I say? 79. And now we are actually loading in a library item. And we can also, on top of that, color correct this on top. You can play with the black lifts. You can see the more knobs you enable, the speed definitely goes down. Oh, sorry, that was the wrong one. This one is the one I wanted, 79. So you can also color correct the library item. But you can see now we've got this nice textured look of the aperture. Pretty sweet. All right, now let's actually apply this to our little render just to show you also how cool it is. And obviously they have a custom input. You can do heart shapes or crosses or whatever you want as well. If you plug in a custom shape here, then you just need to go under Bokeh and pick custom here. All right, so I don't know, let's just have a little play here and try to do this interactively. And let's start out with the cat eye. You can see now that it is teardropping everything. And you can play with the onset, so it starts only on the edges. It's usually a gradual fall off depending on how strong the lens is. If it's super wide angle, you get this effect way stronger. If it's more tele, you don't get it that, like the fall off is not that strong. And yeah, this is light loss, so it just darkens it because that's also happening with the cat eye. Chromatic will not make sense here because these are all on the same focal plane, but you get the nice realistic result, the realistic fringing around. You can see there's like a little color fringe around these guys, whereas this one is quite obvious. There's some color fringing going on. And let's see what else we have. Astigmatism, as I explained, will push them, like make them more elongated or the other way around. This is now more egg-shaped. Similar to what Coma would do. You can see it's really good what's going on here. And Coma does push that even further. You can now see these nice petal looking things. It's not teardrops anymore. And you can play with the lens character. Now we're mimicking this one pretty close. And what we still didn't do yet is the lens hooding. Bring that into play again. Let's disable the lens light loss. And you will start to see, if I go to petal shape actually, that we are cutting them off. We can have them go way into the frame. You can see now how it's being cut off there. And you get really, really strong lenses that do this. This is highly exaggerated, I would say, but it does happen. And again, you can then pick a nice library item. Let's go with 7.9 again. And then we need to switch. The previews just doesn't work that well with a library based, but it works well enough on the round one. So now we're going full quality, and you can really see now the details of all these controls we have. And yes, fair comment to a lot of people saying it's slow and heavy. If you enable all the node style everything to 11, it will be slow and heavy, but this is what you want, right? You want the realistic lensing, bokeh shaping controls, then you just gotta pay the price. If you want to be quick, you can go preview, you can disable the library, and then it's pretty fast. If I can play, you can see how fast this actually now does it. And we can also surely animate the focal point or the max blur. What makes more sense than this? Maybe we can just animate the focal distance from here. Let's go to 41. I don't know, we go 10 maybe. Not sure. Yeah, that's probably good. Yeah, so you can see that this is the per frame executions, 2 FPS at the moment. And if everything is turned on, it will be slower, obviously. I don't have to explain why. I think it makes total sense. Yeah, and that was what I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to give you a good overview of the features that we have. I was thinking if I'm missing anything. Talked about Coma, all of this. Anamorphic Squeeze. I didn't show this on this lens now, but you can obviously elongate them, which totally makes sense. And talked about field curvature, sharper or softer around the edges. Most of these tool knobs will have good tooltips explaining all of this. And another speed up tip, max blur. The smaller you can get this, the faster it will be, because it's essentially a exponential, even quadratic potentially increase of time, because every focal step will multiply itself with its surrounding pixels. So it will just get really, really slow if you go really crazy with the blur. That's why the default is pretty sharp and you have full control over that. All right, I hope this gave a way better explanation about the bokeh and how to play and adjust it. Thank you for watching.